Okay, and we're recording. That's great. Welcome, everybody, to another one of my webinar interviews. And as I've said before, I'm very blessed with these upfront interviews that I've been doing, that I've been getting some top shelf A-flight guests. And pretty soon, as I've said before, I'll be dredging the bottom of the barrel. I'll probably be interviewing, Roseanne Barr or Chevy Chase or something like that. But that's not the case today. Today, I'm very pleased to have someone that I consider a very close friend, even though I've only met actually in person once. I think, Christopher, I think it is just once in Rome, maybe 10 years ago in person. But we've certainly spoken on the phone and emailed and corresponded and that kind of thing. So I'm talking about none other than the great Catholic journalist that many of you are familiar with, Dr. Christopher Altieri, who formerly lived in Rome but has since relocated to Connecticut in the United States. And as my usual practice, I'm going to turn it over to the guest to give a brief introduction of himself rather than me just reading a boring little paragraph biography. So go ahead. Well, thank you anyway. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the show, Chris, and go ahead and introduce yourselves to my viewers.
Well,
Uh,
thanks, Larry. And wow, I'm a great Catholic journalist, huh? Well, that's
oh yeah, I think you're one of the best out there.
far and away the nicest thing anyone has said to me on these here interwebs in a long time. Yeah, I mean, what else could I say? I think you hit all the right. You ticked all the right boxes there. I mean, the short version of the story is that I went over to Rome in mid 90s, I guess, 97, to do some grad work at the Greg. And the short version of a quarter century long story is that I met a girl, and we stayed there. I started working at Vatican Radio almost by accident in around about 2005, I think, and did a doctorate in philosophy while I was there along the way. Did a little teaching here and there in some of the, the places in and around Rome. Mostly they were, these sorts of consortia for mostly U.S., mostly Jesuit, now that I think about it, but don't quote me on that. Schools that would send their kids, their students to Rome for a semester or for a year. Left Vatican Radio in 2017, last day of 2017. The 31st of December was my last broadcast there. Quick and dirty version of that was that I got, it's always an honor to be in the service of the Holy Father and the Holy See, but it was time to move on.
That's very diplomatic of you.
I mean, the very good friend of mine who was and a mentor to me, who was running the English section at the time, Sean Patrick Lovett, was very understanding, and we worked it out so that I finished out the year, I guess, and was planning at that point on going on to write a couple of books that I'd had on the back burner, do some more teaching, write maybe enough to keep my byline fresh, right?
Stop right there for a second. I promised you, and I'm going to hold to that promise, that one of the reasons why I want to interview you is I wanted to promote your book. Your latest.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's right. I do have one out, don't I?
Well, you've actually got two. I ordered I have your book, and I read it on politics, which is excellent. And then I got your latest book. I think it's called After the Storm. Is that what it's called? After the Storm. I have it somewhere on my shelf behind me, and I was going to highlight it.
I think the one you're talking about is Into the Storm.
Into the Storm. I'm thinking of a Mumford & Sons song, After the Storm, I think. Into the Storm, and it's a collection of your reportage over the years, and it's really good. I thought, well, I'll order it because Chris is my friend and I want to give him the royalties, but I probably have read most of everything that's in the book. But there was a lot I hadn't, articles I had missed, and it was good to reread some of the ones that I hadn't missed. It was good.
Well, that book came out last year, right at the peak of Ronatide, I think in April of 2020. So that's 2 years ago now. And it was, a collection of reports and analyses that I'd written over the course of, late January 2018 to just after the big dog and pony show on child protection that they did. That's my daughter Rachel there in the background.
Hi, Rachel. Do you have another book since then that I'm not aware of?
And it's called Reading the News Without Losing Your Faith, which just came out.
That just came out, and I just saw it the other day. So I don't have that yet. I must get it.
Well, I got to rectify that.
No. Let me order it because it's good for subscription, tallies and Amazon.com ratings and that kind of thing. So I'll get it. Don't worry. I have my ways. But I interrupted your biography, so please. And by the way, yes, I'm having a bourbon, so please ignore me. Go ahead.
No. Look, I'm watching you with eager eyes there. That look ain't for you, Larry.
Oh, darn. Oh, shoot. So anyway, you went to the Catholic Herald then.
Yeah, and was there for a few years, and was for a while executive editor at the Catholic Herald. Came over here, and took the lay of the land. You said I've relocated, and that's not wrong. I think I still sort of tell myself sometimes that I'm dividing my time, but it's more and more uneven. I just, in the past couple of weeks, actually took a teaching job at my alma mater. So I am taking a different approach to work and to the work. And enjoying it very much, enjoying the challenge. And hopefully this will give me the time to write the books that I've had on the back burner since the ones that I had on the back burner didn't so much get front burnered as sort of rearranged and reorganized and morphed into the two that you just mentioned. Because, when I left Vatican Radio, I was actually planning on getting out of the mix. I was pretty tired and run down, and my family still recognized me, but I don't know how much they liked me or, any of that. And it was, a couple of weeks after, 3 weeks after I'd left, I think that maybe a little more than that, late January anyway, 2018, that Pope Francis went to Chile and basically, had the entire abuse and cover-up crisis explode in his face. But as I like to say, and I think I've said somewhere, only because he pulled the pin on the hand grenade and dropped it in his own lap.
Yeah.
I remember, and folks, if you want to know, with greater depth and precision and recall of dates, names, facts, etc., then I think it prudent to attempt here. Do get the book Into the Storm, because that's where it starts.
But then the latest book then is going to be an update.
The latest book is sort of a 30,000 foot view of media, and of news media in particular. How to read the news without losing your faith. Yeah, says what's on the tin.
But certainly you give examples in there of news that might cause you to lose your faith.
There's a bit of that. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to avoid. And I'm very grateful to my publisher with that one, the Catholic Truth Society in England, a great publishing house with, terrific history to it. They have, very frequently, their bread and butter is sort of publishing a very different sort of work, catechetical tracts, treatments of specific doctrinal and pastoral issues, devotionals, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
So they were a little bit out of their wheelhouse and out of their comfort zone, maybe with this one. But the brilliant offices of my dear friend Victoria Seed at CTS and Pierpaolo Finaldi, who's their executive director, brought it to print, and I've been thrilled with it.
Well, that's good, and I'm definitely going to get it because this brings me then to really what I want to dig into. I mean, there's so many people out there, people who read my blog, people who watch these videos and other YouTube videos. This is really an issue. How does one, especially in the internet age, social media age, where so much information is at our fingertips, how does one read the news about the contemporary church? And all the scandals and all the corruption and all the debates between the traditionalists and Pope Francis and all. How do you, in a nutshell, then, since you've just written a book about this, how does an average Catholic negotiate not going crazy and losing your faith in the midst of all that?
Well, easy, if you will, or maybe not easy, but it's simple. You remember that we have it on pretty good authority, I'd say, that the bark of Peter will come safely to port. What condition the bark is in when she finally does call, and what happens while she's on the sea and underway, yeah, not so much.
Yeah. Well, that's a good message.
And not to put too fine a point on it, Larry, anyone who reads the Acts of the Apostles as a how-to manual in good governance is doing it wrong.
Okay,
so
you want to unpack that? I think I know what you mean.
This place of ours, which isn't really of ours, is it? Which is the other thing. I love the John the 23rd line, right? Do you know the one about, he's at his desk and it's 10 o'clock at night and he's been there since 5 o'clock in the morning and he's piled high with papers and there are problems of all kinds. And, the story goes anyway, as I've heard it, that he just sort of stood up and tossed up his hands and said, it's yours. It's your church, Lord.
It's your church, Lord. It's your church, Lord. I'm going to bed. I think, I've heard that story so many times. I've often wondered if it's apocryphal. I also like the story.
Well, the Romans have a wonderful expression, se non è vero è ben trovato, which means if it's not true, it's well found is the literal translation. But it's one of the, we'd say in English, I think, if it ain't true, it ought to be.
Exactly. And you've worked in the Vatican, so maybe you can corroborate one of my favorite quotes from John the 23rd, apocryphal or not, when someone asked him, Holy Father, how many people work in the Vatican? And he responded, about half of them. And, and I've always loved that phrase. And I wonder if he actually really said it.
That one, I think we can give that one as good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I've seen it sourced. And I'm pretty sure it was actually in front of reporters.
Well, so it's not apocryphal. It's true. And that just makes, that was cause for his canonization right there.
Well, don't quote me on this. I mean, the old line in my business, right? Guy tells you his mother loves him. Check it out.
Yeah. All right. So let's. I really want to dig into the question that I think one of the reasons why I'm going through, taking the time to sort of go through your credentials, to talk a little bit about, your books and so on, is I want the viewers to know why I actually think you are a great journalist. And it's not just because you're a great writer and that you're very intelligent and you're a scholar in your own right, which is why I mentioned your first book on politics, which is a scholarly book, a very scholarly book. And that's your area of expertise, right? Your doctorate was in
political philosophy.
Political philosophy. And not only are you have all that, but you're connected. You know the Roman scene, you know the Vatican, and you actually probably still know quite a few people that work there, although that's probably diminishing over time as those things go. So I'm just curious, what is let's just open this up to a very broad question. What is your take on the papacy of Pope Francis?
Uh, Poor guy doesn't seem to be able to get out of his own way, is one way to think of it. He is a guy who, folks are going to be upset about just about anything that anybody says these days.
Right.
Outrage is the thing. I talk a little bit about that in How to Read the News Without Losing Your Faith, by the way. That sex sells is the old advertising adage, right? Well, so does outrage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the doctrinal disputes are frankly neither here nor there, for the very simple reason that doctrine has a way of working itself out in this here church.
Yes. Yes.
Governance is a different story. It'll work itself out too, but it makes a whole big mess, and confusion and or conflation of those two things. The teaching office and the governing office, right?
Right.
And we could probably get into a theological discussion that would last until tomorrow or the next day about whether there are three munera or one single threefold munus. So
Yeah.
teaching, meh. Sanctifying, the guy's the Pope, and he popes the way that popes do these days. And governing, let me just say, Larry, that his record of leadership is as amenable to criticism as anyone else's. He didn't make the mess that we're in, but he bought it lock, stock, and barrel. And the reason that I'm concerned with the way that he governs as a journalist is because he is the guy in charge. He sits in the big chair, and to sit in the big chair is to court controversy. Apostolica sede san nemine judicatur is the old maxim. And so if the apostolic see is judged by no man, the very least we can do is, pull back the curtain, shine a light, hold the feet to the fire, do those sorts of things. The watchdog part of the journalistic profession, I think, is the most important part right now. And it requires serious reporting and reporting skills, news gathering skills, investigative skills, and all of that don't come cheap.
No.
So one of the things that I would love to see in the church is a sort of Catholic ProPublica. ProPublica is the nonprofit consortium of investigative journalists and the mastheads that back them. They pool resources. They gather and funding and support investigative projects. And I would love to see something like that.
Well, I think that would be great because it seems to me, and then you can comment on this because I'm completely ignorant, but just as a layman's point of view, it seems to me that modern journalism in general, secular or religious, has fallen on hard times in the sense of the social media and the nature of even television media. Things have gotten very balkanized. It seems to me that journalists have a certain clickbait audience that they cater things to. in general, and that there's been a diminishment, therefore, of journalistic watchdogness, as you just called it, because you get one partisan set of journalists doing watchdog work on the other side of the political aisle, but it tends to be very tendentious watchdogness, and then they're very defensive of their kind. And it seems to me that Catholic journalism, to a great extent, has somewhat fallen into that same rut. Am I wrong about that, or is that an accurate observation?
I'd be a little, maybe I'd tighten it up a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
For one thing, I mean, there are plenty of great journalists doing great work, both in the mainstream and the secular media, and in the Catholic news media as well. And also remember that journalists, because I've been on both sides of this, right? Been a journalist, a beat reporter, and I've been an editor, and I've sometimes had to juggle those hats. Boy, that's interesting.
You were my editor once. You were rough, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Hey, no, I was going easy on you, Larry. You got the kid glove treatment.
And you saw what happened when I started my blog. After you stopped being my editor, my blog post going for
7,000 word long.
Exactly. So anyway, I interrupted you. I want to get back to the thing about journalism. Go ahead.
Journalists have editors, and editors have the interests for whom they work. Now, in a perfect or even a better world, those relationships, those balances of those forces would be aligned better, would be better ordered. But the world is as it is, and it is as we make it. The old adage about newspapers, right? Why do we have newspapers? Why do newspapers exist? To sell advertisements.
Well, yeah. Neil Postman made that, and McLuhan, and also a long time ago. That's right. The most important thing on television, as far as the producers are concerned, are the commercials. The programming is just there as enticements to watch the commercials, right?
Yeah, and now news departments on TV, were for a long time, and in different ways, significantly shielded from the worst of that. Shielded isn't perhaps the right term. There were organizational and structural safeguards in place,
right.
They didn't spring from nowhere. We went through a period of massive disruption and upheaval, starting in the mid 19th century, the Second Industrial Revolution, the great age of print, and then radio, and then television, and all of the standards, practices, ethical guidelines, rules, codes, even that we have developed over time through trial and error, through mistakes made and lessons learned. We are now in an age with the internet that is more like the age of the first part of the age of print, and I'm going back to Gutenberg and his press, and what was it, 1455? And suddenly, we have this sort of epoch d'or of pamphleteering, right? In from the mid 17th to the mid 18th century, right? And in that period, there began to be a little bit of settlement. People began to be able to discern, to understand how to distinguish good and reliable information and good and reliable publishing houses, outlets of information. That all didn't happen overnight, remember? And
Right.
how long it took? Hundreds of years to work all of that out. Literally hundreds of years. And now we're in what, decade 3, maybe decade 4 of the interwebs as a going, sort of public and commercial, widely, diffused concern. And how are we doing? I mean, we all have, heck, I remember a few years back when there was a questionnaire in the Rome diocese, I think it was, regarding, among other things, internet usage. And the question that was on the questionnaire was phrased, sort of almost, it didn't, almost verbatim. Altieri, don't say that, you jerk. The thing that stuck at me, that jumped out at me and stuck with me was that it asked, how many hours a week are you connected to the internet, or do you spend connected to the internet, or something like that. And this is 2015, maybe. Don't quote me on that. It was pretty recently, and in the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure. And I remember thinking, well, all of them, because we all walk around with the entire internet in our pocket. And, we have the sum total of human knowledge at our fingertips, and we use it to send each other cat memes.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Have I got that right?
Oh yeah, what I had for breakfast and all that. And
yeah.
On the other hand, were it not for the internet, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now. And so you have to take the good and the bad together, I guess. You do have this overflow of information though that comes via the internet, and so there's the question of criteria. How does an average person adjudicate this flood of information that you just go on Facebook, your Facebook feed, and if you have a sufficient number of Facebook friends, you probably have people from all over the political and religious spectrum. Excuse me a second.
Yeah, and I should say, by the way, that I'm not at all sure that it was the Rome diocese. It was a questionnaire that I saw in Rome when I was there. I was there from 97 to June of last year. So, that's a big window, but it was, I bet more than a nickel that it was in the last 5, maximum 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's shift gears a bit away from journalism to just some actual topics.
Yeah.
Let's get down to some brass tacks here. As you know, Pope Francis's motu proprio, Traditionis Custodes, followed up by the answers, to the dubia questions, has created quite a stir in the church and has, for all intents and purposes, really restricted and rolled back Summorum Pontificum of Pope Benedict in terms of allowing a very wide use of the traditional Latin Mass, and now a very, very constricted use here and there of the Latin Mass. What is, my own, I'll tell you right up front, my own thoughts on that is that was a pastoral mistake on the part of Pope Francis, that it's not going to solve the problem that I think he's trying to solve. And it's only going to make matters worse in terms of balkanization in the church, division in the church. It doesn't seem very synodal to me either.
Well, I don't know what synodal means, and I've asked people. I asked Cardinal.
Maybe we should talk about that first. Then, what does synodal mean?
I mean, I asked Cardinal Czerny, point blank in words, at a presser a few years back. I think a couple of years back, maybe. and you know, his answer was not direct. I don't know that anyone who read it would have been able to make a good deal of well, sense of it, head or tail of it. You know, it was sort of if
I think
you
I saw the video where you asked the question.
if you know where you know it, you know it when you do it, but it's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
You know, which is fine, but if synodality is supposed to be a program of governance from the church, saying what it is should not be so difficult.
Right.
And if it's not a program of governance, then what is it?
Right.
Are we, you know, is it, you know, I don't know. We think it's a program of governance because it is a mode of governance in much of the Christian East, you know, where it's an
Right.
actual thing, you know, so the mind goes there. I think quite reasonably. But there's only so much of, well, it's not that. Well, what is it? Well, it's not that thing. Well, it's difficult to say. And, you know, we want, it's about a whole bunch of things that could mean anything, right?
Yeah.
So you know, a very simple, straightforward, and, you know, I love some of the talk around it, you know, don't get me wrong. And, you know, as far as reform of governance goes, I'm all for it. And I think that we need to have very, very serious and hard conversations about how power is ordered and organized and exercised in the church. And we need to have those conversations with a view to reforming the order and the organization and the exercise of power in the church. We need to do so. We need reform that does not go afoul of the church's divinely given constitution. But I think there's a whole lot more wiggle room in there than people realize.
Right.
Once you, you know, realize that the hierarchical structure of the church has had different structures, and at different times and different points in church history has been organized and ordered differently. You know,
Right.
having a look at all of that is, you know, a place to start, and let's have that conversation if we're going to have it. But, you know, I feel like the guy who sometimes wants to say, can we talk about what we're talking about?
Yeah. I agree, because it's I don't think there's a great deal of clarity at all, even in Rome, as to what they mean by this, which leads me to believe something I'll get to in a second. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at like the promotional materials put out by the American bishops, little poster that said a listening church, inclusion, diversity, you know, open-mindedness. What in the heck do these buzzwords from 1975 called, and they want their poster back? I mean, dialogue and all this. What do these buzzwords? It reads like it came out of a human resources department of a major American woke corporation that wants to just toss out every bromide on the face of the earth. And I don't know if the American bishops ever walked that horrible thing back because it was a laughing stock almost immediately on social media. And it makes you wonder if the American bishops have no idea, none, clearly none, what synodality means, then maybe this needs some clarification because based on what I've seen coming from the Germans, Americans, others, it seems to me that what synodality is, it's an attempt to re-legitimate voices that had been delegitimated within the church under the previous two pontificates. Ideas and attitudes are now going to come back out. It's like the New Ways ministry now has a voice in the synodal way, and various other women's ordination movements have a voice now in the synodal way. It's a way of legitimating voices by including them, all on the pretext, well, we're just listening. We just want to get every voice in here. Well, why don't we have a voice from a Nazi or a Satanist or somebody else? There has to be exclusionary principles as well. There's got to be a guiding set of criteria as what constitutes legitimate Catholic conversation and what doesn't constitute legitimate Catholic conversation. And the mere bringing of these groups back in through the back door is a way of re-legitimating their voices and reopening those debates. That's my take on what the synodal way is. And I stand by that. I don't think it means Eastern style synodal subsidiarity, sharing of authority, the farming out of various curial functions to episcopal conferences. I don't think it means that at all.
Well, I'd be, surprised if, any U.S. bishop actually ever saw that silly meme that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy is going to bureaucracy. And, the folks in all of the various and sundry USCCB offices have,
Well, yeah, but what does that what
what are
does
they
that
going to
tell
do?
you? Yeah,
It is, it was an infantilizing, it was silly. But, and so obviously condescending, not to say contemptuous of the faithful, that it was good for a laugh. I think I had something to say about it on somewhere on the Facebooks or something like that.
well, it's
But
very
sorry, it's good for a hook. But I mean, at the end of the day, what it's one more thing that came and went, and if that's look, let me put it to you this way. There, outside the Catholic bubble, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
inside the Catholic bubble. Very few
Inside the
people care.
Catholic bubble, well, depends, which bubble, because there are bubbles within bubbles, right?
Yeah.
In the, in the one where you and I are floating around, folks can get their, they get a bee in their bonnet over stuff like this. Okay. But, if the program of Francis's, and here we can come back to the question that you asked me earlier that I never really answered. If the program of Francis's pontificate has been and is to be an outgoing church, a less self-referential church, a church that does less of navel gazing, I'm wondering whether they aren't doing it wrong.
I agree. And the thing is, by all accounts, and you would know because you're, a journalist and you've covered the Vatican beat. Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis, was elected to reform the Curia. And part of reforming the Curia, I think, meant more than just developing new flow charts, streamlining the bureaucracy, and that sort of thing. I think there was an awareness on the part of many cardinals that a lot of functions currently residing in the curial offices maybe need to be, as I said, farmed out to other places, other Episcopal conferences. And the fact is, Pope Francis, as far as I can see, failed miserably at reforming the Curia and has not, and in some ways has concentrated power more in himself, perhaps, than in the Curia, but concentrated power more in Rome than in ever before. Because it seems to me, and now I'm getting off topic, that more than any other pope of my lifetime, the papacy of Pope Francis is about Pope Francis.
I don't think that's wrong. And I think you were quite right when you noted that that power is concentrated the in the Pope and in the person who is holding the office rather than in the office. Although those, the office comes with considerable power, right? And
Yes.
Francis is governed largely without the Curia. Even when his curial departments and department heads have done things, they haven't really done things. Even with Traditionis Custodes, you look around the world, it requires the implementation of local ordinaries, and lots of them in lots of parts of the world have seen fit to look around their place and go, there's no trouble here. You mentioned that you thought that he, and apologies for this. I'm sort of getting back into my old ways. This is, I should say, a different sort of experience for me, because I'm usually the one asking the questions. See,
Yeah.
but you mentioned that you think that you have been able to identify the problem that he was trying to solve with Traditionis. As far as I can tell, the problem that he was trying to solve with it was a bunch of people being mean on the internet.
Yes, that's it.
Who cares? Again,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Pope Francis gets a lot of his information about the American Catholic Church in particular, funneled through people who might be looking at certain factions of American traditionalist internetism with a jaundiced eye and feeding that information to the. I don't think Pope Francis sits around watching Taylor Marshall, okay, or reading books by various traditionalists critical of him. I think he just learns through others that this is a huge part of the American Catholic Church. And I think that's what he was attempting. That was the dragon he was trying to slay with Traditionis.
I don't know. Traditionalism is different in different parts of the world. It's a big church. Whether he was trying to nip stuff in the bud here or whether he was even thinking about, the church in the United States all that much, I genuinely, I don't know.
Well,
I know that there is that there is a strong presence of faithful devoted to worship in traditional modes. I think that lots of pastors in the United States, a lot of whom may have been initially skeptical, or at least, looking with some degree of circumspection upon the people who were, really gung-ho for tradition, certainly in the wake of Summorum Pontificum, welcomed them with generosity, learned a lot about things that maybe they didn't know before, found a great thing, and that, things in the United States have been working, a lot better than in some other places. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that, in many places in the world, traditionalism is actually wrapped up with certainly, certain stripes or flavors of traditionalism. that is at least self-styled as Catholic, is tied up with some pretty unsavory things, politically and socially and otherwise. I just don't see how that is a problem that warrants the attention of the Roman pontiff, let alone so drastic an act of governance, essentially, not only truncating but reversing an experiment, if you will, in liberalism. And I use that word in its etymological rather than
right.
any other sense. What did Benedict say? If you want to say the old mass, go ahead. You want to use the old books to, do what
and knock yourself out there. Yeah, go ahead.
Whatever blows your hair back,
but
right?
What do you say about this? I think everything you just said is true, but what sticks in my mind, which is why I think Traditionis, which is, after all, very specifically really about the old Latin Mass. If you look at the statistics, the vast majority of Latin Masses of the old rite are in the United States, France, and the UK. It's just not really a significant phenomenon at all anywhere else in the world. You find little tiny pockets here and there. So I can't help but think, maybe I'm wrong, that Traditionis had the French, the British, and the American churches in mind more than any. In other words, if it's an attempt at a pastoral solution to some problems in the Latin Mass communities, then clearly the pastoral solution has to be directed at the pastoral problem, which would be in France, the UK, and the United States. Especially, I think, in the United States. But hey, I could be wrong about that. I'm not a Latin Mass goer myself. Uh, I attend an Anglican ordinariate parish, as my viewers know, my readers know. So I don't have a huge dog in this fight, but I do have a lot of American traditionalists who are friends of mine.
Well, I don't understand what the big deal is with, if folks want to use the old books, and it's not just for the Mass. I mean, a lot of these guys are, close reading of Traditionis has, a lot of restrictions on, the use of the old ritual books for, other sacraments, blessings. There's all sorts of things that it does. And does it in a very, very, sort of slapdash, blunderbuss.
I like that blunderbuss phrase there.
It's not a carefully crafted piece of legislation at all, and the responsa ad dubia that came from Archbishop Roche's office, the Congregation for Divine Worship. I thank you for your opinion, Archbishop Roche. Great googly moogly. The guy was telling people what to do with their parish bulletins.
Yes,
that's psychotic.
Larry. That's what I had.
That's psychotic.
It is, and it's what I had in mind when I asked the rhetorical question: is this synodality? I'm thinking, I like great googly moogly. That's a good one, Chris. Great googly moogly. I mean, for crying out loud, Rome is now telling parish priests what they can and cannot advertise in their bulletins with regard to Mass times. You can have a Latin Mass, you just can't put that in your bulletin. My goodness. I think psychotic is the right word. And as soon as you read something like that, there's an ulterior motive here. There's an agenda here that goes beyond a mere pastoral concern. Sean Blanchard in Church Life Journal, I think, wrote one of the best articles on this, and I blogged on it, where he said it's really not about the liturgy at all. It's about the appropriation of the Second Vatican Council. I think that's not necessarily completely true, but I think there's a deep insight there.
I remember Blanchard's article and remember reading it with significant interest. It brought me, I won't say great delight, because the subject was not the most delightful, but it was very edifying, that's for sure. And I do think you're absolutely right to point it out as one of the best things written on the subject. If it wasn't, my only question is, if it wasn't about the Latin Mass, then why was it about the Latin Mass? You know, and what's look,
Right.
The idea that there absolutely must be liturgical uniformity, or else,
Yeah.
or else what? That idea itself, it was not an idea of the Council Fathers. You don't find it in the documents of the Council. You certainly don't find it in Sacrosanctum Concilium.
Nope.
And it was something accomplished by fiat around the time of the promulgation of in the promulgation of the new books that Pope Saint Paul VI promulgated.
Right.
Now, look, I like the idea of Big Tent Catholicism. Okay,
Yeah, me too.
I like the idea of a church as a place where here comes everybody. And I just don't see how the health of the body, the good order of the church, is served by this sort of by this sort of tack. I don't get it.
Yeah, and the church has never had a uniformity of rights. I mean, there's always been a multiplicity of rights in the Catholic Church.
There's multiplicity of rights. There's multiplicity of uses. There's, even in the Latin West, even around the time of the promulgation of Quo Primum, if your books had, 200 years, or was it 300 years? Don't quote me on that. I can't remember.
It's one or the other.
You were good to go. The issue there was making sure that no Eucharistic, Christological, ecclesiological, or other heresies had crept into the prayers, or the prayers purporting to be those of the whole church, right?
Yeah.
And they said, well, if your books have sufficient antiquity, you can go ahead and keep using them. Now, a lot of people, as a matter of fact, didn't, because there was they wanted to show their Romanitas, and there were local ordinaries who implemented the new books with a heavier hand than others, and there were some publishing issues with, all right, well, we can't get them, and we can't prove this, and we're not sure about that, and guys taking close looks at things. History, Larry, it happened. But there wasn't an imposition of the new books. There wasn't a suppression of two core of everything that came before. And there was no need for that at the time. Now, what happened. Okay, I attend myself very happily a very ordinary parish in the ordinary that celebrates mostly in the ordinary form. I love the Latin Mass. I love the traditional Latin Mass. And I know lots of people who do. What am I supposed to say to that? And whether I do or I don't, and whether what kind of people they are or I think they are, whatever issues they have going on in their life, you know, I,
Yeah.
I have a mirror and I have looked in it. Can we maybe get on with our lives?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an astute analysis, and I like your phrase. It happened. I mean, and we have to pay attention to history and statements like the one from Roach. Just it's infantilizing, as you said before, with regard to something else, because it presumes that we don't know history, that we're uneducated, that we can't just look around and see that there are other rights in the church, and that this current situation is utterly unique that's being proposed to us. But to go back, and we'll maybe move on to something else. To in some sense defend Sean Blanchard's thesis, you said, well, if it wasn't about the Latin liturgy, why was it about the Latin liturgy? I mean, I think it's because Rome realized that a certain movement was coalescing to a certain extent around the Latin Mass. That it had created these little pockets, these little networks of communities. So, like you said, the idea of big tent Catholicism, here comes everybody. Catholicism is what appeals to Pope Francis, I think, and I think this is his vision of Vatican II, and I think Blanchard is right that Francis is concerned. I think his synodal way is an attempt as well to implement some semblance of what Vatican II meant by collegiality. In a ham-fisted way, but I think that's what. So I think his concern is with a certain old-fashioned sort of throwback retro approach to Vatican II that might be reminiscent of say the 70s or something like that, and I think he views the Latin Mass crowd as an obstacle to be removed to that process, a thorn in the side to just be plucked, and the deal is, if you're interested, for example, in just in the political sphere, in the secular political sphere, if you're interested in promoting big L liberal causes, human rights, and these sorts of things, the one thing that you are allowed to be illiberal about are illiberals. Okay? And it's not a contradiction at all to say, okay, there's one group of people I'm not going to tolerate, and that's people who don't tolerate others. And I think that's sort of Pope Francis's attitude here with regard to, I'm trying to build big tent Catholicism, and yet Summorum Pontificum created these growing pockets of resistance to my vision of big tent Catholicism. So I'm going to do this to try and remove them by force, by cutting off their wellspring and to drying up their will, to sort of take this liturgy away from them. Now, I could be completely wrong in that read, but that's why I think in many ways it's very poor as a form of legislation. It's like you said, blunderbuss. And I think it's because it wasn't well thought out. It's emotive. It's I want to just, won't somebody rid me of these meddlesome people? I think that's what it was. Maybe I'm totally all wet, Christopher.
No, I don't think you are. And I just Thomas is good on this point. Don't ask me where exactly right now. The idea that that there are some things that our intellects cannot grasp because they are rational, and we reason to intellection, and there are things that, like God, who exceeds our intellect. There are other things that we cannot grasp, that we cannot understand because of an infimity of reason. There's so little reason in them that they just don't make sense. There's so little intelligence in them.
Yeah.
And this, I don't want to say that it's utterly indecipherable or indiscernible. But and I don't think that you've completely missed the mark there either. I'm just not completely sold yet. I still don't get it, but I do know that it's caused a lot of hurt. I think unnecessarily. I still don't see the need, and the reasons continue to me anyway to be unclear. That's all.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, I didn't bring you on here to just discuss Funzione Custodes, even though it's one of my hobby horses. And we've already been talking now for a little bit over an hour. So I don't want to go on and on and on forever, although I could talk to you forever. So I want to ask you, I mean, is there any question you might want to ask me, or is there some topic that you would like to discuss?
Well, I remember you and I had an exchange. It was about the relationship of the theology that is at issue, at stake in all of this, and the politics of it, the governance side of the question. And I know that for my part, I didn't do a fantastic job of articulating the point. My intervention on the point was, and I can't even remember what specific issue it was, but it was not a model of clarity, if I may say. But I think that the core of the point that I was trying to make, folks, that's my son Joe. He's just back in the door. Is that while we can and should, and I think must, learn from the history of theology, much of what we receive and study as rarefied theological distillation
Right.
was itself actually the work of reflecting theologically on pressing issues for the polity that was the church, right?
Right.
And this was a kind of thinking that people were undertaking in a time when the world had a theological vision of order, which we don't have today, right?
Right.
At least not an explicitly or a self-consciously theological one, certainly not one based on supernatural revelation. So if I had to ask you a question and put it down, and if this were a press conference and I had, one sentence to get out a question, it would be that. What is there a need to recover a sense of the political importance of theology? And if I may add a second prong to it, and if so, what does that mean for theological science in practice?
That is a huge question. I remember now, the context was.
Hey, you asked me to ask you, all right?
I know, but it's a great question, and we could do a whole show just on this. The context was I had written a blog post on Robert Imbelli's wonderful article on Vatican II. It was kind of a defense of Vatican II, where he was going through the theology of Dei Verbum Gaudium et Spes. It's resource mont stuff. It's Christocentric. It's all great, and I wrote a blog on it. It was good stuff, I thought. And then I did a whole video interview with Father Imbelli and Rodney Hauser on it. So I posted all this on Facebook, and then you posted this, what you just kind of, a version of what you just said to me. about that's all well and good, but what about the sort of the politics of this? And I misunderstood it entirely as you attacking the very notion of doing theology in the first place. Well, I get that from so many people, which is ordinary people don't want theology. Ordinary people just want, okay. And so I went off on you, and we had a little argument, and basically you ended up saying to me, "That's not what I said, Larry." And I went and reread.
I'm remembering this now.
Yeah, I went back and reread it, and then I had remember Saturday Night Live? Emily Latella would go off on it, and then she realized she was wrong, and she said, "Well, that's different. Never mind." And I had an Emily Latella moment. Oh, okay, well, never mind. Just forget that whole 10 paragraphs of diatribe I just wrote against you. But the fact is, I mean, I don't really have time to unpack a complete lengthy answer to you here now. But in a nutshell, the answer to your question is yes. Yes, yes, yes. It depends, of course, what you mean by politics, but I think
the ta politica, right? The things of the city, because
yes.
the church is a polity.
Yes.
She is we'd say a societas perfecta, which doesn't mean that she's unblemished. It means that she has properly and of right all of the elements and the capacities to order her life.
Yes, and this is such a great topic. It gets right to the nub of certain things, which is this. I just came out with a new blog post yesterday where I was talking about dignitatis humanae, religious freedom, that kind of thing. And in the midst of that, I described ressourcement theology, which I think animates much of the council, is not an attempt at all to repristinate the past or to engage in a patristic fundamentalism or to simply bypass the medievals in favor of Scripture and the Fathers. No. It's an attempt to reinterrogate the entirety of the tradition through a Christocentric lens and to reappropriate through a reinterrogation of everything, but grounded in the tradition. Now, the danger in all of that, of course, is that if you're going to open up the tradition to a thoroughgoing reinterrogation from a set of theological premises, you're opening it up to the danger of the wrong theological premises doing the reinterrogating. And that's exactly what happened after the council. The Resource Monk guys thought they were going to get to do the reinterrogating, and they didn't. Somebody else did.
And you go to it with the wrong set of heuristics, and you're going to get bad results.
Exactly. And this is actually one of the flaws then of the Resource Monk project and the council. I'm not entirely, devoid of a sense of the conciliar failures, that there was a naivete there. Well, and so my point is, even Ratzinger makes this point. Ratzinger says, I think when he was Pope Benedict in an interview, maybe with Seewald, he says, look, the fact is we were so intent on getting the theology right that we lost sense of the pastoral implications on the ground in the polis, all right, in the city that the church occupies. We lost sight of, in a sense, what the effect of all of this was going to be. And the council was billed as a pastoral council. And so we spent all of our time getting the theology right, and these squabbles between the neo-scholastics and the ressourcements, between de Lubac and Lagrange, and all of these things get played out in the council. Meanwhile, nobody's really paying attention to how this is going to play out in the city of God, how it's going to play out in the church, concretely down there in the trenches. And so I think absolutely, I think even Benedict is aware now that, and it's one of the reasons why I started the blog too, is to occupy a certain space in my tiny little insignificant small way of trying to negotiate, to connect the theological enterprise with the real polis that we live in and the politics of people's lives. And I think not only was your comment on Facebook correct, it was resoundingly correct. And it's a shame I didn't really understand it at the time. It's just after a while, when you get as much hate mail as I get, you get thin-skinned after a while. As I said to you in a private message, you start reacting to any even slight positive suggestion in a rage. But anyway, this is not my apology to her. It's a way of saying, I think, Christopher, you have really nailed the problematic here, and it has to be addressed.
For one, am really glad you did start the blog, by the way. And not only because it means that I didn't have to edit you anymore.
Yeah, I wasn't.
No, guys, no, that's not fair to you, and the listeners need to know that it was an absolute delight that you took some, must have been much harsher editorial direction than you were ever than you were used to getting and ever expecting.
That's true.
With great grace and I think that you also you did some fantastic work for us at the Herald.
Well, thank you for that. But you were
and
actually the only real editor I've ever had, and that was the problem. I mean, you actually edited, and and sometimes cutting out massive tumors. Like, you have to understand too, there was an 800-word limit. Do you know what that means to somebody like me who spews out 800 words talking in his sleep? I, I mean, geez, that was a crucifixion to me to try and keep it within 800 words.
Yeah, it's a tough job,
Yeah.
and one of the things it was a delight whenever I got your copy, and now we're going to go in. It's going to become the Mutual Admiration Society, right? But
Yeah.
it was a delight whenever I would get your copy, even if it was a mess, because frequently, and you'll remember this. I would have said to you, you don't have one column here. You've got, 3 or 6.
All
And
jammed in.
yeah, they're all, and now I've extricated the one that I like best and I think fits here, right? The, the fellow who uses that very well and from whom I've learned to use it more deftly is our mutual friend David Mills.
Yeah.
Who's an absolute wizard at that work. There was the problem was always that there was more there than I could possibly use in any one installment. And that's exactly the kind of problem that an editor always wants to have. Well, always is a big word, because sometimes it's, you're up against the deadline and you just want to have the damn copy.
The thing is, I'm a metaphysician, a theological metaphysician at heart, which means that I'm never satisfied to just sort of talk about a topic. I have to talk into a topic and take it all the way back to its roots, and it's just I wasn't cut out for that kind of very disciplined sort of 800-word limitation, right? But anyway, we probably should wrap this up. We've been on the air now for an hour and 20 minutes, and I like to keep it within an hour, 20, hour and a half. Thank you for that question, because actually it reminds me of something I need to write about now, which is to write about that connection. In fact, if you ever wanted to do a guest blog, Christopher, on my blog to talk about that, you'd be most welcome. You don't have time, I know, but anyway.
It's a very kind invitation, I'll tell you what. If I've got, if I do put it together, I'll shop it to you. All right.
Okay, good. Because I tell you why, I'm really, I don't know if vastly is the right word. I'm really interested in this topic, and yet it is not in my wheelhouse. I've taught courses in political philosophy only because when you teach undergraduates in a place like DeSales University, somebody says, "Hey, our adjunct just quit. You need to teach that course." Okay, I'll teach that course. But it's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know my colleague Rodney Hauser knows political philosophy very well. I don't. And but we're not just talking political philosophy. We're also talking sociology. We're also talking culture. We're talking about pastoral theology and what that really means. And those are, I mean, I'm into the German metaphysical Balthasar kind of gobbledygook. So it's hard for me to get my mind around all that stuff. It's out of my wheelhouse, as I keep saying. So,
I'm not sure it is. I mean, I'm not sure, and I don't know Balthazar anywhere near as well as anyone who has a right to say anything that anyone would want to hear about it. But I'm not entirely convinced that he isn't a political thinker.
well, yeah.
And I remember a few years back at the celebration for the Benedict XVI Center for the Study of Religion and Society at St. Mary's University, Twickenham. I went and gave a talk on Benedict XVI as a political thinker. And he's not the guy that people would think of as a political thinker, but if you understand in the way that you very carefully and very well reconstructed that remark or series of remarks that he made regarding the need to recover sort of the political importance of what it is that we do as thinkers living the intellectual life in the service of the church. Then maybe what we're looking for isn't people who are writing to each other about a series of politico-philosophical or theological doctrines, but people who are wrestling once again with the fundamental question, how shall we order our lives together?
Yeah. And that is the question I ask. It's the question Balthazar asks. And that's ultimately the ultimate political question. How do we order our lives together? And in that sense, the gospel is political turtles all the way down. So yeah, okay. But one of the things I lack is something that you have, which is it is extremely helpful to know sort of the history of these various pastoral iterations of the church in various cultures, so that one doesn't get locked in with a certain tunnel vision simply into your own. But anyway, I think we're out of time, sadly. We could do this again someday, and I say this to all my guests, and I mean it. Let's do this again, because I could talk to you. I keep looking this way because my computer screen is over there, so I keep wanting.
I'm doing the same thing the whole time. So
yeah, because my camera's here. You got to see my gorgeous face. But I want, and so I'm going to put my glasses on now. And the main reason is, you get that glare from the light, so I don't wear them. And I'm going to put my glasses on so I can shut things down.
Sorry, were folks getting that from me? Because I kept mine on.
No, okay. So no, yours are fine, I think, Chris. So thank you, Christopher, for coming on the show tonight. Let's seriously do this again. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And by the way, before I get off of here, I'm so ill prepared. I'm such a terrible interviewer. I really liked your book on politics, but the title of it has escaped my brain. But I want my viewers to know about. What was the name of it?
It was The Soul of a Nation: America as a Tradition of Inquiry and Nationhood, and it's
back here on the shelf. And if I'd thought ahead, I could have held it up. But it's a great analysis of the American political enterprise from a sort of Catholic philosophical perspective, I thought. And I did agree with all of it.
I'd be worried if you did.
I'm more from the Hauerwasian sort of Dorothy Day wing of things. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation we can have another day. Thank you, Christopher, and God bless. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you, Larry.